The Velkrin had survived 3 million years as a spacefaring civilization by mastering a single elegant philosophy: when trouble arrives, leave immediately and apologize profusely on the way out. This strategy had served them beautifully through 17 galactic epochs, 4 universal restructurings, and that awkward incident with the Zenthari hive mind that nobody talked about anymore. Their pacifism wasn't just cultural, it was genetic, philosophical, and arguably the only reason their species hadn't been wiped out by natural selection generations ago. They possessed no weapons, no military, and no word in their language for strategic deterrent. They did, however, have excellent running shoes, metaphorically speaking, which made their current situation particularly unfortunate. The Krathox Empire had decided, with all the diplomatic subtlety of an asteroid through a space station window, that Velkrin territory would make an excellent addition to their expanding dominion. The Krathox were everything the Velkrin weren't: aggressive, militaristic, and possessed of a cultural identity that could be summarized as: if it moves, and we want it, we take it. They'd given the Velkrin exactly one standard galactic cycle to evacuate their 17 colony worlds before the annexation began. The fact that they'd given any warning at all was considered generous by Krathox standards. So the Velkrin did what they did best: they ran. All 6 billion of them packed onto colony ships, transport vessels, and in one desperate case, a decommissioned waste management barge that still smelled faintly of processed sewage. They scattered across the galaxy like seeds in a solar wind, each group seeking refuge wherever they could find it. The largest fleet, carrying nearly 2 billion refugees, faced a unique problem. Every established galactic power had politely but firmly declined their asylum requests. The Thal Collective was already overcrowded. The Mordanian Union cited economic concerns, which was politician speak for "we don't want the Krathox mad at us." The Jintari Harmonium had sent back a very apologetic 14-page dissertation explaining why helping the Velkrin would disrupt cosmic balance, which everyone understood meant the same thing as the Mordanian excuse, but with more philosophical window dressing. This left exactly one option that nobody had seriously considered: humanity. Earth had joined the galactic community a mere 80 years ago, which in cosmic terms made them the equivalent of that neighbor who just moved in and nobody quite knows what to make of yet. They'd arrived in their primitive chemical rockets, all wide-eyed enthusiasm and alarming statistics about their own history of self-destructive warfare. The galaxy had collectively decided to keep them at arm's length, polite enough to invite to the occasional council meeting, distant enough to avoid any actual responsibility for whatever chaos they might generate. Humans had a reputation, though most species couldn't quite articulate what that reputation was. Something about being simultaneously friendly and terrifying, like a predator that wanted to be your friend, but might accidentally eat you out of enthusiasm. They'd introduced concepts to galactic culture that seemed deliberately contradictory: weapons that could level cities, yet they'd brought medical technology that had cured 17 previously untreatable diseases. They'd started 3 trade wars in their first decade, then resolved all 3 by hosting something called a barbecue summit that left everyone confused but satisfied. Ambassador Kelthrin stood before the human diplomatic assembly with what he hoped was an appropriately humble posture. The humans had requested this meeting take place on their orbital station rather than Earth itself, which Kelthrin appreciated. He'd heard disturbing things about Earth's gravity and its effect on Velkrin's skeletal structure. "We come seeking sanctuary," Kelthrin began, his translator rendering his species' melodious language into flat English. "Our people are peaceful. We require only a temporary refuge until the Krathox lose interest in our former territories. We ask nothing but a place to exist quietly and without burden to your civilization. The human representative, Velkrin, believed his title was Secretary General, though human governmental structures remained baffling, leaned forward with an expression that humans called a smile. Velkrin had learned these could mean many things, not all of them positive. How many are we talking about? The Secretary General asked. 2 billion, give or take a few million. They're currently in orbit, waiting for your response. We have our own supplies, our own ships. We simply need permission to park, so to speak, in your solar system. The human consulted with his colleagues in rapid whispered conversation. Velkrin caught words like logistics and infrastructure and Jesus Christ, that's a lot of people. Finally, the Secretary General turned back. We'd be honored to offer sanctuary to the Velkrin people. Humanity knows what it's like to be displaced, to need help. We'll provide you with everything you need. Velkrin felt 17 different organs simultaneously relax in relief. Your generosity is beyond measure. We simply need a safe orbital zone, perhaps near one of your outer planets, where we won't interfere with your daily operations. The human's smile widened. Oh, we can do better than that. Give us 3 weeks. We'll have your sanctuary ready. 3 weeks later, Velkrin wished he'd asked more questions. The human escort shuttle approached what had once been Luna, Earth's singular moon. Velkrin stared through the viewport, his chromatic vision registering details his brain refused to process. The moon's surface had been transformed into something that looked less like a sanctuary and more like what happened when military engineers had unlimited budgets and severe emotional problems. Humans had a reputation, though most species couldn't quite articulate what that reputation was. Something about being simultaneously friendly and terrifying, like a predator that wanted to be your friend but might accidentally eat you out of enthusiasm. They'd introduced concepts to galactic culture that seemed deliberately contradictory, weapons that could level cities, yet they'd brought medical technology that had cured 17 previously untreatable diseases. They'd started 3 trade wars in their first decade, then resolved all 3 by hosting something called a barbecue summit that left everyone confused but satisfied. Ambassador Velkrin stood before the human diplomatic assembly with what he hoped was an appropriately humble posture. The humans had requested this meeting take place on their orbital station rather than Earth itself, which Velkrin appreciated. He'd heard disturbing things about Earth's gravity and its effect on Velkrin's skeletal structure. We come seeking sanctuary, Velkrin began, his translator rendering his species' melodious language into flat English. Our people are peaceful. We require only a temporary refuge until the Krathox lose interest in our former territories. We ask nothing but a place to exist quietly and without burden to your civilization. The human representative, Velkrin, believed his title was Secretary General, though human governmental structures remained baffling, leaned forward with an expression that humans called a smile. Velkrin had learned these could mean many things, not all of them positive. How many are we talking about? The Secretary General asked. 2 billion. Give or take a few million. They're currently in orbit, waiting for your response. We have our own supplies, our own ships. We simply need permission to park, so to speak, in your solar system. The human consulted with his colleagues in rapid whispered conversation. Velkrin caught words like logistics and infrastructure and Jesus Christ, that's a lot of people. Finally, the Secretary General turned back. We'd be honored to offer sanctuary to the Velkrin people. Humanity knows what it's like to be displaced, to need help. We'll provide you with everything you need. Velkrin felt 17 different organs simultaneously relax in relief. Your generosity is beyond measure. We simply need a safe orbital zone, perhaps near one of your outer planets, where we won't interfere with your daily operations." The human's smile widened. "Oh, we can do better than that. Give us 3 weeks. We'll have your sanctuary ready." 3 weeks later, Velkrin wished he'd asked more questions. The human escort shuttle approached what had once been Luna, Earth's singular moon. Velkrin stared through the viewport, his chromatic vision registering details his brain refused to process. The moon's surface had been transformed into something that looked less like a sanctuary and more like what happened when military engineers had unlimited budgets and severe emotional problems. "We call it Sanctuary Station," the human escort, Commander Jackson, announced with obvious pride. "Took round-the-clock construction, but we got it done. State-of-the-art defensive grid, enough living space for 3 billion people, full agricultural domes, manufacturing centers, the works." "Defensive grid," Velkrin repeated slowly. "Absolutely. We've got overlapping plasma shield generators here, here, and here." Jackson pointed at various sectors on his datapad. Railgun batteries positioned at optimal firing angles. Missile pods, conventional and nuclear, your choice. Point defense systems to handle fighter craft. And this baby here, he zoomed in on the moon's north pole, is our primary weapon. We call it the hammer. It's a mass driver that can throw a projectile at 0.99% light speed. Could punch through a battleship like it was tissue paper. Velkrin's skin had shifted to a pale violet, which in Velkrin physiology indicated either extreme stress or imminent biological shutdown. "We asked for sanctuary, a place of peace and safety." Jackson looked genuinely confused. "Right. That's what this is. Nobody's getting through these defenses. You'll be completely safe." "Commander Jackson, I don't think you understand. We're a pacifist species. We don't use weapons. We don't believe in violence. We wanted a quiet place to live, not a military installation. But how can it be safe if it's not defended?" Jackson's confusion seemed entirely authentic, which somehow made it worse. "You said the Krathox were chasing you. What happens when they show up looking for you? You can't just ask them nicely to leave." "That's exactly what we do," Velkrin said weakly. "Has that ever worked?" Velkrin paused. "Not statistically speaking, no." "Well, there you go." Jackson gestured at the weaponized moon, with the pride of a parent showing off a child's art project. "This'll work. Trust me." The tour continued, each revelation more horrifying than the last. The residential sectors were lovely, spacious, well-designed, with gardens and community centers, and everything a civilization could need. But they were buried under 30 meters of reinforced armor plating. The agricultural domes were marvels of efficiency, capable of feeding billions. They also doubled as weapons platforms. Even the schools had blast doors and evacuation protocols. "We designed the whole station to be modular," Jackson explained as they walked through a residential corridor that looked suspiciously like it could transform into a defensive choke point. "If you ever need to expand, we can add more sections. Each module has independent life support, so even if parts of the station are damaged, the population stays safe." "Damaged," Velkrin echoed. "You're anticipating combat." "Well, yeah. The Krathox aren't exactly known for giving up. When they realize where you went, they'll come looking." Jackson stopped at a viewport overlooking one of the railgun batteries. "But here's the thing," we ran the numbers. "The Krathox have a fleet of about 300 capital ships, right? This station can track and engage 5,000 simultaneous targets. They literally don't have enough ships to overwhelm the defense grid. And that's before we factor in the Earth defense fleet backing you up." "The what fleet?" "Oh, didn't we mention? We've got 12 battle carriers and 40 destroyers on permanent patrol in this sector, plus rapid response wings if things get spicy. You're not just getting a sanctuary, you're getting the full protection of Earth's military. Kelthrin's violet hue had deepened to nearly purple. We don't want military protection. We want peace. Jackson considered this. Sure, but isn't peace what you get when everyone knows attacking you would be suicide? I mean, philosophically speaking. No, Kelthrin said firmly. Peace is the absence of conflict, not the promise of overwhelming retaliation. Jackson looked genuinely thoughtful. That sounds nice, but kind of impractical. How do you enforce it? You don't enforce peace, you embody it. And how's that working out for you? The question wasn't cruel, just honestly curious. No offense, but your people are currently refugees because someone decided to take your stuff and you couldn't stop them. Meanwhile, nobody's tried to take our stuff in 70 years, and I'm pretty sure it's because we've got the capability to glass entire planets if pushed hard enough. We don't want to, and we never would unless absolutely necessary, but the capability exists. That's deterrence. Kelthrin wanted to argue, but the logic had a certain brutal practicality that his species had spent millions of years trying to evolve beyond. We just wanted somewhere quiet to live. You've got it, Jackson assured him. Nobody's going to disturb your quiet. We've made absolutely certain of that. The Velkrin settled into their new home with considerable trepidation. The humans had, to their credit, made the living spaces genuinely comfortable. The weaponry was kept out of sight from the residential areas, which helped somewhat. The human military personnel staffing the defense systems were polite and respectful, if disturbingly enthusiastic about their weapon specifications. For 6 months, life proceeded peacefully. The Velkrin established their communities, started farms, opened schools. Children who'd only known the inside of refugee ships finally had space to play. The elderly had gardens to tend. Artists created new works inspired by their survival. It was almost possible to forget they lived inside a weapons platform. Then the Krathox arrived. Alarms that the Velkrin didn't even know existed began blaring throughout the station. Kelthrin rushed to the command center, where Commander Jackson stood studying holographic displays with calm focus. They just dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge, Jackson reported. 23 capital ships, 52 support vessels. Pretty standard intimidation fleet. They've come for us, Kelthrin whispered. We should negotiate. Perhaps if we explain, they're hailing us, Jackson interrupted. He opened the channel. A Krathox commander appeared on screen, all chitinous armor and aggressive posturing. Human facility, you harbor Velkrin refugees. Surrender them immediately, or be destroyed. You have 1 standard hour. Jackson glanced at Kelthrin, then back at the Krathox. Yeah, that's going to be a no from us. The Velkrin are under Earth's protection. You're welcome to leave peacefully, or you can stick around and find out why that's a better option. The Krathox commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. You protect these worthless pacifists. You and what fleet, human? Jackson's smile was cold. Computer, give our friend a complete sensor readout of Sanctuary Station's defensive capabilities, and highlight the Earth Defense Fleet moving into position behind them. The Krathox commander's posture changed as his sensors updated. The mandible clicking stopped. There was a long, very telling silence. The Velkrin aren't worth a war with humanity, the commander finally said, trying to salvage some dignity. Glad you see it that way, Jackson replied cheerfully. Safe travels. The Krathox fleet retreated, jumping to hyperspace with what could only be described as desperate speed. Velkrin stared at the empty space where the fleet had been. They just left. Yep. Jackson closed the display. Told you the defenses would work. You didn't fire a single shot. Didn't need to. They took one look at what we'd built and decided your people weren't worth dying for. That's the beauty of deterrence. It works best when you never have to use it. Velkrin sat down heavily in a chair designed for human proportions. We asked for sanctuary, a place of peace. And you got it, Jackson said, genuinely earnest. Nobody's going to attack you here. You can live peacefully, raise your children, rebuild your culture. Isn't that what you wanted? Yes, but Velkrin struggled to articulate the philosophical dissonance. We wanted peace without the shadow of violence. Jackson considered this. I get that. Really, I do. But here's the thing. The galaxy has violent species in it. The Krathox exist, whether you like it or not. You can choose not to be violent yourself, and that's admirable. But someone has to be willing to stand between you and those who don't share your values. That's what we're doing. By building weapons capable of destroying fleets. By building weapons we'll never use unless someone forces us to. Jackson corrected. There's a difference. You wanted sanctuary, a sacred, safe place. Well, historically, sanctuaries only worked because someone was willing to defend them. Temples had guards. Monasteries had walls. The concept of sanctuary has always included the idea of protection. Velkrin wanted to argue, but exhaustion and relief overwhelmed him. His people were safe. The Krathox had fled. No one had died. Wasn't that what mattered? Thank you, he finally said. Even if I don't entirely approve of your methods, you've protected my people. That's worth more than philosophical purity. Jackson clapped him on the shoulder with careful awareness of Velkrin bone structure. You're welcome. And hey, maybe someday the galaxy will evolve to where your way is possible. Until then, we've got your back. 3 years later, Sanctuary Station had become a model of interspecies cooperation. The Velkrin had thrived in their fortified home, while humans continued to maintain and upgrade the defenses that had never fired a shot in anger. 7 other refugee species had requested sanctuary under Earth's protection, and humanity had built similar facilities for each of them. The galaxy still didn't quite know what to make of humans. They were the only species who could build weapons of mass destruction and use them as doorstops, who treated peace as something worth fighting for, literally. Other civilizations offered sanctuary with paperwork and bureaucracy. Humans offered it with plasma cannons and genuine smiles. Velkrin had eventually accepted the contradiction. His people lived peacefully because humanity had made peace non-negotiable. The Velkrin would never build weapons, and they'd never have to because someone else had built them on their behalf. The galaxy had learned something important. When humans offered sanctuary, they didn't just provide a refuge. They provided an absolute guarantee enforced by enough firepower to make the stars themselves think twice. It was aggressive pacifism, militarized safety, peaceful intimidation. It made no philosophical sense whatsoever. It worked perfectly. And somewhere in the cosmos, the Krathox Empire quietly removed 17 star systems from their expansion plans, because even they weren't crazy enough to fight for territory that humanity had decided belonged to someone else. Human sanctuary came with a simple promise: you'll be safe here. The unspoken part, delivered with characteristic human enthusiasm, was the addendum that made it all work. We've made absolutely certain of it.